Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Riley K. Jones. I'm a writer, teacher, and author tuber, and today we're going to talk about what is foreshadowing and how do you write it. So today we're going to talk about foreshadowing. So foreshadowing is, if you don't know what it means, is hinting at something that is to come later in your story. So foreshadowing is not just for mystery writers. Foreshadowing happens in all different types of literature to really highlight typically the theme or the message that you're trying to portray to your readers. And this foreshadowing also will somehow reflect and be resolved in your final act of your book or movie or play, whatever you are writing. So like I said earlier, foreshadowing can place special emphasis on your writing to really highlight the theme that you're trying to portray, or it can also build some suspense and tension for your readers. Typically when you are doing foreshadowing, you want to follow the rule of three. The rule of three typically is when you say something important 3 different times to emphasize its importance. It's usually done in play writing the most, so that way the audience can follow along with the story and pick up on those key details. And even if they missed like one of the references, they'll get the other. Typically that's like you say like an important line like the doweress is in love, and you mention it 3 different times throughout the whole play, just in case someone coughed or sneezed or didn't really pick up on it at the first time. It's really just like giving a little hint to the reader, to the audience, that was important information. You also want to space out your foreshadowing. So depending on how long your work is, like if you say in a same paragraph something 3 things that happen, foreshadowing works best when it is spaced throughout a scene or throughout even the novel itself or the whole play, whatever again you are writing. Some ways to include foreshadowing in your novel or whatever you're writing is through dialogue, narration, and even symbolism. So these are 3 ways that I find very helpful to use, and that way you can kind of mix it up, and that way your reader is subtly picking up on these clues and not just being like blatantly told like, here is the clue, read it, it's in your face. You don't want to be in your face brazen with every single piece of foreshadowing. It's okay if it happens once or twice throughout your novel, but there are some tropes and ways to use foreshadowing that helps your novel without being like in your face, here it is, and your audience feeling kind of stupid and being like, I don't really need to know that. I kind of picked that up. So again, foreshadowing really should be subtle, but beautifully woven into the rest of the image that you're trying to create. So one way you can do that is through dialogue. Maybe you have a line, like a throwaway line even, that someone says, oh yeah, the doweress is in love, and you mention it and you move on, like it's not even the forefront of the scene, it's just kind of like thrown in there.
Alright, editing Riley here. So what I mean by with like just throwing it in, you don't want to throw it in so that it's like oddly stand out-ish. You want it to be woven in again, so that way it is on topic, on point in what you're trying to say, but you do so in a way where it's just like, oh yeah, by the way, this thing happens. So if the doweress is in love is supposed to be a thing that you're trying to convey with your readers, maybe for some reason you bring up love and then like you organically want it to develop, or maybe even someone says it as a joke, or like however you're trying to do it, it's going to depend on you, kind of how you craft it, but you want to make sure it's organic. That's the point that I want to make. Don't just have it sticking out like a sore thumb, like they're talking about a murder and then you're like, oh yeah, by the way, the dower's in love, and everyone's looking at the guy or gal like he's crazy. That's not what you want. You don't want it to be like really sticking out, unless it depends on the voice. It really will depend on you, but most case scenarios work it out organically.
And you can also then throw in narration, so maybe you hint at the same phrase, or you hint at maybe an action that shows that the dowerless is in love instead of just saying she's in love. Like, you do want to like mix it up and not have the same exact line, though I have seen that does work sometimes. But you know, like showing it through the narration later down the line that the dowerless is in love. Maybe she giggles at the count's joke, or maybe she, I don't know, blushes really furiously, and you're like, oh, the dowerless is in love. I kind of see the flirtation here. And then you can have it in symbolism. Symbolism could be anything that, like, maybe she plucks a red rose symbolizing love, and you're like, oh, she is in love, like she has red roses with her all the time, and you're like picking up on all of that. So then when you get to the third act reveal that, like, oh, we have mentioned that she was in love, there was even like narration of like love like experiences, and then she was always having red roses always around her or mentioned around her throughout the story. So when you get to the final act, you're expecting that she's going to be in love, and you don't even realize that you're doing this. A lot of foreshadowing should be that subtle, like little bits and pieces that kind of all fall to place together in the end, and you don't realize that they're even happening. What's really fun to do is you have those clues laid out, and then all of a sudden you flip it on your head and you're like, oh, all those things actually meant something completely different, or it was the person that you didn't expect. Whatever may happen. As I've mentioned before, you do want to have foreshadowing with purpose. There needs to be like an end goal to your foreshadowing. You have to have some sort of end goal in mind, even if that means that after you write your draft, you go back through and you like pepper in those foreshadowing clues to the end once you figure out the end. You also want to make sure that like your foreshadowing does have good payoff. So you want to leave it in, but not be so blatant, but not be so subtle where your readers miss it completely. And it's okay if like along the way your readers kind of pick up on it and maybe even guess it. If they're guessing it like halfway through or like 3/4 of the way through before the big reveal, that is completely fine. That is good foreshadowing. The way you can figure out those, if you're hitting those beats and hitting those foreshadowing levels, if you have too much or too little, really that's going to depend on readership. So you're going to have to find someone who would like to read it to see if you're accomplishing those goals. I know in my work sometimes I nailed some things on the head and they're like, yeah, I was kind of picking up on that, and so when they got to the reveal it made sense. But then sometimes you're like, oh yeah, I mentioned like every time this X thing happened with this X character, and they're like, oh, I didn't pick up on that at all, but like, yes, that's good. So some things are gonna hit well and some things are not gonna work well. It's gonna be like a workshop experience. We're gonna have to play around with those things and read different types of readers. Be careful to like be foreshadowing only certain things that are needed for the plot and not just random little things either. When you are foreshadowing, you want to make sure that it's not every single line is foreshadowing, or even every single chapter really needs a lot of foreshadowing. Foreshadowing is best when it's just like, it just seems like the mundane every little thing. For example, in Roll with Thunder Hear My Cry, TJ references this pearl-handed pistol 3 times before the final act of the book, and he gets that pearl-handed pistol, but it's not a good it's not a good result. So you don't want to have every single scene, every single line of a character be foreshadowing, but you want to just have a few things foreshadowed for the end. Because remember, foreshadowing is really just highlighting the message or the theme of your book, and it's gonna give you the big reveal, the character learning the lesson type of stuff that you want to be foreshadowing. And if you are in the middle of like a 0 draft or even a first draft and you're like, how in the world do you do foreshadowing? I don't even know what I'm writing yet. Like, don't worry so much on the foreshadowing at the moment. You can always go back through, whether you're halfway through the manuscript and you figure out that plot point, or you are on your second draft trying to layer in the foreshadowing, you can always go back and add that in. But again, if you already know your end goal, it's great to like start layering some pieces into that goal so that later you don't have to do as much work. It's really going to be a you dependent thing when you put in the foreshadowing in your book. However, it is super awesome and super important to every story that you are writing. So just a quick recap: pace out your foreshadowing, don't use it too often. Some different ways you can spice up your foreshadowing can be through dialogue, narration, and symbolism, and I'm sure there's other things as well, but those are the 3 things that I like to use. And mix it up, make sure there's purpose, make sure that it reveals and is explained in the end, and make sure that it somehow benefits, again, that end goal that you want your character or your reader to figure out. And always follow the rule of 3. If you have any questions about foreshadowing or any other types of writing tips or tricks, please let me know in the comments down below. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you like this video, please make sure to give this video a nice big thumbs up. It lets me know that you like videos like this one. And if you haven't already, click subscribe. I release all new videos on all things writing and reading every Thursday. Thank you guys again so much for watching. Keep writing, keep reading, and stay creative. Bye!